was, and I was catching little things like in her brain of like what she thinks it's going to be like, and it's definitely not going to turn out that way. Well, it's not that, it's just that the things that get in the way, it's like the same dream everybody starts with of like, oh, I really want to be a musician because it'll bring all these positive things, and then along the way as they start adulting, they like hit these roadblocks, like this is not what it was supposed to be, you know?
Yeah.
And it changes their focus, and that's what's happening to you and me, is we're changing our focus from like what the current state or environment is, you know, of that job or of that work. So yeah, dive deep. Okay.
All right.
Introduce us.
Okay. So I wrote a pretty lengthy intro, but it's worth it. Okay.
I don't care.
So welcome to episode 3 of the EMOTIVATIon podcast, where we put energy in motion towards mental freedom. On this podcast, we talk emotional intelligence, spread mental health awareness, and sometimes get a bit metaphysical and esoteric. Today's episode is part 2 of diving into the subconscious mind of an artist. If you haven't heard part 1 yet, go ahead and click the link in the description down below and take a listen. For those who haven't, here's a refresher. I asked a question on all my social media platforms to all my artist friends. The question was, what are your biggest struggles, insecurities, and fears as an artist? Today, my guest Lindsey and I are going to discuss each of your responses together. But first, I want to remind everyone who Lindsey is for those who haven't listened to part 1. Lindsey Gallagher is a musician. Yes. She plays piano and she sings. She's also a dancer, a skilled intuitive, a dog trainer, and a hobby researcher of the mind. Lindsey, is there anything you would like to add before we kick part 2 off with these amazing responses?
Gosh, amazing responses. Yeah, you painted me like so beautifully, like she's an artist with so many interests, and I'm like, my doctor said it was ADHD, so I really like yours much better. But thank you. No, I think I'm good.
You're good?
Yeah.
Okay, so last time around, in our last part 1, unfortunately, it was part of the half that was lost.
Oh my God, we lost so much, and both of us lost it. I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. You're like, lucky for me, I recorded everything, and I was like, yes. And then you were like, lucky for me, I lost everything too. And I'm like, girl, it's the universe. They're trying to give us a swift kick in the right direction, and they said, don't do it.
So Lindsey and I both got extremely frustrated, but then we both had to come to terms with the fact, like, you know what, it's lost, like, it wasn't meant to be. Maybe that, like, take this as a lesson that's a good, like, it was a good practice run, you know?
I also got so much information in my meditations this week because I was recognizing the power in our dialogue. Like, you and I have so much shared information, but we also, and along with the way that we think, but we also have a very good back and forth, a very dynamic back and forth. And in the first one, I was I was really learning a lot. Like, I was telling stories and this and that, but I was learning about, like, hold on, what are we doing? Because this is a thing, you know? And I got so much information about how to direct my own energy into something that's going to be a little more concrete, a little less tangent oriented, though I can't promise anything. I love my tangents. And our perspective is so useful towards people trying to get into this industry and knowing what to expect, and the emotional health aspect of it as well, because it's just something that really hasn't been touched on. I've seen a lot of stuff on emotional health and a lot of stuff, music in different fields, but really tying them together in complex dialogues over a period of time. You know, it's just, we have a really big relevance between us for our audience. So after coming to that kind of acknowledgement over the last week and like really pondering it, I'm like, oh, we probably lost some of our footage because we needed to become more concrete in how we're saying it. And also, like, you know, the fears I was having, I was like, oh no, we can't talk about metaphysics or emotional health because it will cancel out like people who identify with certain religions. And I'm like, no, it's because people have their spiritual practice that you have to touch on it and include it. It's the fact that it's not included that's the issue. And so once I came to that terms, I was like, yeah, no, I get it now. And that's probably why we lost all the information. It's like, I know I have to get on board.
I think we also discussed last time that because I know we were scared of turning people off when we mentioned the word spirituality. So we can preface again going forward, if you hear that word, Lindsey and I were basically talking about how, like, every single time you hear the word spirituality, try to think of it as the practice of the self and the focus of the self.
Yeah. And really inclusively, that was something I had to learn, is that everyone's got their own kind of identity, right? And I talked a little bit in the part 1 about actually unidentifying and the kind of Buddhist principle of unidentification and becoming less exclusive, or what I call excluding. And the spirituality thing has taken such a negative turn because it is very new age, and I am the millennial that wears the crystal beads that everyone's like, oh, you're so lazy because you can't hold a job. Like, that's me. Okay. So when I'm recognizing those negative connotations, it makes me insecure along the way. Now that I've kind of processed out a little bit of my own exclusivity, I was like, hold on. The reason why millennials feel this way towards their work is for a reason. The reason why spirituality has become a thing is it really is in testament for the childhood experiences that you had towards spirituality at that time, which was called religion instead. And there's this whole movement of people who hate religion and are going atheist, and that's me as well, that actually unsubscribe from that practice of the self. Some of them don't resubscribe to anything, and then there's another part that resubscribes to the spirituality instead of religion, and understand that actually both of them are the same thing. Actually both of them are acknowledging your purpose on the planet. That's basically it, is acknowledging your purpose and your power on the planet and the virtue in it. And this expression is what art is. And that took me a second to recognize, oh, that's what I'm running into in my field, is getting into music in a virtuous way that's not getting taken down by the arrogance, the drugs, the alcohol, the exact same issues that you deal with in your workplace, the repression of emotion, all of that. It's about how to maintain your expression in your work, which is now our art, right? And how to maintain that and still be in alignment with yourself and still feel okay with yourself. Don't feel put down. Right. And that was an untangible thing I was feeling in our last interview, that I could feel it. I understood that there was a really good idea here, but I was pulling it out in all these different ways and stories, from what I experienced in college and what you experienced in college and all that stuff. So for spirituality moving forward, understand that we are talking about the expression and the practice of the self and how you feel about yourself emotionally as you navigate different physical environments, which could be, obviously romantic relationships, your career, the main fields, and even group communities like church. If you're a part of a church, this is not something that is spirituality against religion and church. That's not the point. And that was what I was trying to come to terms with. So spirituality is your inclusive, exclusive existence. What did I say? Inclusive and exclusive, experience in your own existence and your alignment, how to maintain it. That's it. And that's really what we're talking about. That's why I can't exclude spirituality from everything we're talking about, because I'm everything is about how you maintain your focus and how you maintain your sense of self, right?
Yeah.
So
that's beautiful. Yeah. I love that.
Thanks,
I think I'm not sure if I mentioned this quote from this book that I mentioned in part 1. There's a quote in here that says, if you want to get better at your art, you got to get better at your life. So that's essentially where we're going with this, where we're attacking how different areas of your life could be either contributing to the flow of your art or the blocks of your art. And there's this pie, because you mentioned a few things in there that just reminded me of this pie chart that the artist Sway mentions as an exercise. It's basically a chart to check in with yourself daily. On this chart, it says to split it up into 6 categories, and 6 categories are spirituality, exercise, play, work, friends, and then one is romance or / adventure. So
cool.
This is
it's kind of almost breaking down your day. That's really neat.
Yeah,
I've been kind of doing that without even knowing that.
Yeah, because these are all needs of an artist, or just even in general, a person.
Dude, so what was your one thing you did last time that I think we should retouch on? what's the definition of an artist? Because I remember I said something like, there's a fallacy that people think that if you are into music or you know, draw, these are very physical aspects of art, but you talked about what book was it where peeling an apple can still be artistic? What's the definition? Is that the artist way?
From what I gathered from this book, and then also just my own personal definition, I feel like art is something that, like, you create something out of nothing. Anything out of nothing. And also something that hit me in this book too was there was a really interesting chapter in there. Before we get into the responses, I just want to like go off of this little tangent. There was this really interesting chapter in there that said a really good exercise also to help like an artist block is to not read. And I'm guessing that this also can consist of like not being on technology as well, not reading books, not reading, or even listening to like YouTube videos or something like that, like anything that's words that are not of your own.
Oh, yeah.
And it says that the importance of this is to sit in your own silence. And the reason why this is important is because that's a really good way to get to your true essence and your true self, and you start to emerge with your own ideas or literally your own thoughts out of nothing, you know? And because oftentimes we don't realize that even some of our most like favorite inspirations can be our like biggest blocks, because we have some expectations to some degree that like, oh, it has to be like this or something like that. You know what I mean?
Dude, I'm like dreaming in my brain. You're like, sometimes they can be a block, and I'm like, yeah, we're too busy fangirling.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
That's like literally what's happening. That's the fangirl complex. I make jokes about it all the time on my Piano with Johnny journey, is I'm joking that like everyone is a total fangirl of this guy, and me included. I love it, you know? But it's funny because I actually this week had to separate out the days that I do like my Piano with Johnny piano lessons, which is where I'm following the statements of a teacher. This applies to anything, any kind of authority figure, which I think we should discuss too, the definitions of authority figure. Anytime you're following an authority figure means that they're doing something right in your brain, and you want to do something right too, like this person, fangirl, okay? And when you're fangirling, after you understand what they're doing right, you also have to have your evaluation period. And I was lacking my evaluation period, and that was really why I had so many jokes about not practicing, and why everyone, procrastination. It's your evaluation period of how to create what it is that you learn. And it's really about this pendulum of back and forth, like, wow, this is so cool. And when you start to hit that place of like space again, and you want a little bit more, and you're on some free time or whatever, that's when I go back to my teachers, teachings, lessons. And there's so many different, obviously, aspects of that. Like in the morning when I'm eating breakfast is when I do like spiritual teachings and different things. You know, the Teal Swan videos I did when I first woke up this morning was reviewed that thing, which I had already seen, but it was good to review it. And then you have your evaluation period. After I watched it, I did a meditation. Did the completion process on like two different things, you know? And if you don't have that evaluation period, you're right. Like it's a complete crutch and a complete block, because you basically don't have that creative period for you to find your point. You found theirs, but how do you find your point, you know?
Mm-hmm. And we come to like strange, not strange, it's strange in a sense because they're like out of the blue, but we come to like self-realizations and or revelations or whatever when we don't even I guess prime our minds with any form of content that's not our own. You know, it's very interesting how like I find myself some mornings where I don't listen to music, I don't listen to any podcasts, I don't watch any videos, I don't read or anything, and then I start my day like, you know, I jump in the shower, and it's really interesting just being in complete silence of what random thoughts do come to mind and everything, and then I feel like they always somehow come back around throughout my day in my inspiration. It's just like, oh, this reminds me of like what I was thinking of earlier to myself and everything. And I feel like that alone is also creativity, when you can sit in your silence and you can draw some sort of inspiration of your own, like inspirational thoughts of your own. I feel like thoughts are a form of creativity. Because
and also, too, when you're talking about drawing your own inspiration, meaning, I think, has a huge deal to deal with inspiration. And if a lot of your thoughts yield a negative feeling, which is nobody's fault, that's just what you've learned, okay, is when you yield a negative feeling, usually you feel this pedaling backwards. It feels negative, and to feel the pedaling forward is by finding the positive meaning. And when you find the positive meaning is usually when you find the positive action, right? And so really having that evaluation period where any part of your life, whether I'm evaluating something about piano or I'm evaluating something about my emotional well-being, whatever it is, that evaluation period is how you really transmute what you've learned. Talked about the inner child work, right? What did you learn in childhood about this thing that's coming up in your brain, and transmuting it into what it means now. And that's really the spiritual evolution of anything you're doing, your sense of self, but piano too. Like I've found that so interesting is how the way I was taught piano, the way that piano is being taught, or even music, because I sat through Kyle's bass lesson the other day. The way that music is being taught nowadays is different. It really is different. It's more formula based. It is more creativity based. It's like, here's some chords. How do you put them together? Versus read this note and copy this page, which is, so it's interesting, but I feel like everything we're doing as humanity is actually getting more creative if you think about it.
It's really, it's especially interesting trying new things, new endeavors as an adult. Like, I think it's a really good practice to take a kind of art lesson or an art class of something completely foreign and new to you, because I feel like, overall in general, art is a great way to perform shadow work, where like you figure out where your blocks are, where your biggest like issues are deep down. And I've done this myself when I've thrown myself in dance classes that like I've never tried before, and I had no confidence in, because it's amongst other people who've been doing it for years. I like was that one person that, I was doing it for like only a year at that point before I like gained the courage to take a class.
Yeah.
And it's always fascinating, the stories that like you tell yourself when you approach, like when somebody puts you on the spot and then like says, all right, like here like for example, a dance class that gives you a few moves and then is like, all right, here, now do something with it. And that's always every like person's biggest fear, is like being given the reins like that, like being given the control like that,
being given the authority. I want to talk about it. We're gonna get there. I was gonna ask you, because something came up for me. Why do you think it's in the new creativity, like the new dance class, versus maybe the more familiar? So you've been doing this dance class for however many, and you feel like comfortable, but you could be creative there, right? Why is it so important to do something new? I've been criticized, by the way, of jack of all trades, master of none. And I always think that's so funny. And I'm like, damn straight, never a master of anything.
Oh.
Like, I find it so ironic when people say that to me, because they're like, oh, yeah, look, just screwing around. And I'm like, oh, geez, I hope so. Like,
yeah, yeah.
But why do you think that new class, what's so fundamentally like present there that's not present in the familiar aspects of creativity?
Let's see, I'm going to channel this. Well, for one, I think it's kind of like flexing a new muscle, because when you are used to practicing something for so long, or doing something for so long, you start to, it's kind of like closing your mind off to new possibilities and everything, or new anything, new realizations about yourself, or about like how to execute something, or even just like you learning like a different way to like for dance. I learned more about how to strengthen the mind to muscle connection, because I used to do something very like formulaic, where like at the gym you're taught very specific exercises, right?
I was gym junkie too, yeah.
Yeah, because you're like, okay,
lift your weight, do your mechanics.
Yeah,
it's
this
not the
exercise,
same expression. Yeah.
this exercise will feed this muscle and everything.
Yeah.
And when I started tackling dance, I started realizing that like, oh, these certain movements come from strengthening these muscles and everything. And then I also like am able to focus on like different areas of my body, like choreography.
Body awareness, man.
Yeah, body awareness is huge,
yeah.
because like it's one thing to just be told like, okay, like flex that muscle, but it's another thing to actually like,
it's almost like you're creating that flex for yourself.
Yeah, and identifying where it's
militant.
like coming from or where it's going and everything. I don't know if this
you said something really cool about the dance class, and how like the first time you start something new, it's almost like the way that your mind talks to itself, because it's intimidating, right? Everyone knows to try something different, it's intimidating. And the thing that you mentioned was that you have to be in a certain place to accept those negative self-thoughts from the new thing. The familiar thing, regardless of how familiar you are, which is always some amount of familiar, but not familiar enough, you have a certain trusting process, but you don't have a trusting process for the new thing that's triggering. And new things, any kind of new artistic expression is usually always triggering, especially to someone who doesn't consider themselves artistic, which was what a lot of our last talk was about, was like artists, and we even talked about versus the non-artists, or the people who are like, I could never, wow, you're given a gift, I love that when they're like, you were given a gift. It was something that was given to you, not it was nothing that has to do with you and the amount of hours that you put into it.
Yeah, yeah, it's just like, oh, you're lucky.
Yeah, a gift from God. And I'm like, don't worry, I'll take it for sure, but it wasn't like this just happened. It comes from the release and resistance. And actually, it's so funny, the piano with Johnny, one of the reasons I'm so fangirl and I'm completely down to sit and peddle that guy my money and everybody else's that I can, is he hits on a super fundamental principle of the fact that you have to learn for yourself. And you have to talk yourself through this crap in order to get through any of his curriculum. And he has just a library. It's like a library of videos. You don't have that back and forth of someone to sit and validate you necessarily. It's really up to you. And I love it because for the most part, there was a point in my life where I was willing to do that, but I can't afford a piano teacher. I am one, and I could not afford myself, to be perfectly honest. And these types of new environment, like there's so much new stuff coming out nowadays that gives people their own authority to learn. Which brings me to my next point. What do you think authority is? Because this was a huge thing that came up for me this week as well. And I think will also segue us into the work environment, because people have this thing like, oh, if I was a musician and if I was an artist, I could finally express myself, like kids especially. I want to grow up and be this, right? But there is always an authority figure in any job that you have. And that's why The Office is so funny, is that it really plays on like these types of super funny internal emotional prospects, right? And what does authority mean to you? Let's start by defining it.
Here are a few dictionary definitions of the word authority. One is the power or right to give orders, make decisions, and enforce obedience. The right to act in a specified way, delegated from one person or organization to another. Official permission, sanction. And another is the power to influence others, especially because of one's commanding manner or one's recognized knowledge about something. The confidence resulting from personal expertise. A person with extensive or specialized knowledge about a subject. An expert. Authority. Well, I remember we last spoke about how they kind of always resemble our parents to some degree, those who were raising us or looking after us. They even can be like teachers, because like when we were young, we weren't just raised by our parents, we were also raised by other adults. And let's see, authority, I feel like that's a tricky one. It could be a bunch of things, because it could be like...
No, it applies to everything, right? So my definition, I taught one of my, what is she, 9? I taught her to sign a music contract with her mom to do a duet. And her mom was like, what? And I was like, hold on. And it had to do with, she is a brilliant musician, okay? I'm not even going to use names because it's probably going to feel like I'm putting down my other students. She's a prodigy. When you think about prodigy, like this child is ridiculous. She picks up things immediately, and she knows it, and not like in an arrogant way, in like a self-assured, like, let's do it, let's get to work. Okay. She was the one everyone was asking about at the recital. Like, it's so funny. Okay. Well, I asked if she wanted to do something with her mom. I'm all about collaborative work environments, okay? And that's what we're bringing back to becoming an artist, how to stay an artist, how to stay in this work field and not feel like you're going to die. And it's about keeping that sense of collaboration. Well, collaboration's competition is authority, because the minute you are in a collaborative environment, which is this way, authority puts it up in this way. It straightens out that circle and dumps everyone in a line with someone on top. And what I define authority as is someone who navigates better than you do in this area. So my student felt like in music, she's like top tier, man. She's confident. I know it. She knows it. We all know it, right? Then her authority figure, or the person who navigates the home and the emotional well-being, which is your parent. Your parents teach you the emotions, and they teach you that they know best. Whatever. That's what parents do. Comes in as the authority figure of emotions and says, I'd love to do a duet with you. And she just goes ballistic. She threw started all this expression that I was like, wow, disrespect straight out just attacking her mom. No, you can't sing with me. No, fine. If you want to play the piano. And I was just like, oh my God. And it came down to the fact that she felt like the authority and felt like she couldn't hold her own authority over her own work, which is what it comes down to in the field. When you feel like you can't hold your own authority anymore, where does your expression go? Oh. Well, it went to this person that I don't trust emotionally, which is usually the issue, is because the person that is your authority figure, usually you don't have an emotional resonance with. We're actually not taught about working like in industry from the heart. We're talking about working from the mind. That's industry, right? Is working from the mind, logic, blah, blah, blah. And authority figures is about knowing who navigates best. Now, if you understand that you navigate your own expression best, that means you can't have an authority, which does what? The minute you try and get into a collaborative environment, you instantaneously create competition, because most people are not on this page. So now this brings us to Point Podcast, why I'm like, dude, we could have episode after episode after episode about this, because what millennials are doing, a lot of millennials have actually stopped subscribing to this environment, understanding that they're not valued no matter what we do. Okay, I won't get paid. All right, I'll work 70,000 hours a week. Wow, I'm still lazy? Never mind. It's not like I'll ever be able to afford to buy a house. It's like they're completely unsubscribing. But you have to resubscribe to the authority figure. So one thing is that our lazy generation of young kids is that they have to become their own authority, and this is what I'm trying to teach my students, what needs to be more relevantly taught, and hopefully we can teach through our just having these types of conversations. Is taking back your own authority means that you have your own responsibility and your own self-control. What this has led me to with piano is like, oh my God, I need to develop a practice habit right now, because I need to have a set list that's really long so I can create an environment for other people to participate in, where I teach them the authority. I'm not your authority. I'm not your mom. I'm not your boss. I'm your teacher. So what? I'm on keys, you're on voice, we're still collaborating. It doesn't matter what my age is. It doesn't matter any of this stuff. And if you can't do your job, it just means that you're not in my environment. It's nothing personal. That's, but it's about holding your own authority and your own environment together, and what that environment looks like, and how to build that environment would be even more so. So in your environment right now, tell me about your authority figures, because that's where a lot of your questioning was my insecurities. Your insecurities regards your authority figures. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. It regards yourself in respect to your authority figure. Because if you're your own authority figure, everyone's like, oh, I know I accept myself,
yeah.
For the most part, or maybe you do, maybe you don't. But who are you finding right now, as we go through this beautiful Mars retrograde regarding work, is your biggest competition in your self-authority that's causing those questions?
Yeah, for me, I like to, when you say authority and the way you speak about it, I start to think about the word of power or empowerment, because you can easily switch the word authority out with the word power. And that brings me back to its core. I feel like it brings me back to my connection with my mother. And what I notice is she ends up becoming the common authority figure in every single workplace that I come into. And it's always this dynamic of the authority figure in authority figures in my life always challenge my trust in myself. So I can think of.
Do you have an example? Like, think of like an example where you really had a conflict with authority, especially that "yes I am, no you aren't" type of thing.
Yeah.
Got into those. Yeah.
I remember one production in particular. I'm not going to say any names of what show it was, but I remember that this dynamic popped up the most, and I remember this was the one show that changed my whole life as far as like from basically exiting out of victimhood, because I remember a string of events happening to me that all took my power away, and it all made me these people made me doubt myself constantly. And if there was any issues in production, not only did I blame myself in my mind, because I was used to blaming myself in my mind for anything that ever went wrong, but like it manifested outside, where like I was the scapegoat very often for this production.
I remember, if it's the same production when we were living together, if it is that same production, I always
it is.
Yeah. By the way, for anyone watching, okay, Sabrina, I don't remember if you introduced yourself. She's like a high-end Hollywood artist designer. Like when you think about the industry, all the jobs, okay? I used to play social tricks by just like guys that would be like enamored with your beauty, right? And they would come and be like, oh, hey, you could just tell from a mile away at this weird like burrito place that they're checking you out. And I would just be like, do you know what she does for work? They would be like, and you'd be like, stop it, because it would just attract all this hilarious fangirl attention, and I was but she's talking about like the high-end shows that you are seeing, the number one shows that are on the air right now for animation, okay? Those are the ones she's working on. Again, not saying names because we know all the people that, you associate with, whatever. One of the things that was so funny is that when you have an authority figure in your childhood who teaches you these different meanings of different emotional words, which is really what child work is like, you get an understanding of what it means, and then you exist within that book of rules. That's what your parents lay down, these rules, and you exist because we're creating organization and order in the house, but we're only so far along in understanding how emotions work that we can only organize them so well. And that's what evolution is about, is evolving those concepts in adulthood and reteaching yourself, like, oh, my parents knew this much about emotional well-being and the self and spirituality. My parents knew this much about the world. And especially when you grow into adulthood, you start to recognize where you start to like know more, or start to hold your own authority and refine that belief structure. And when you're not sure of yourself yet, when you are young in age, and I just say, like, you haven't been on the planet that long, that's always what I say, regardless of your age, like, oh, you just haven't been on the planet that long. That's regarding you can't hold your own authority. When you don't hold your own authority, it's recognized in other people, and it's recognized in people who also don't hold their own authority. And if someone is in an authoritative, like, management position, say, and they recognize that they feel very insecure, and they see a young person come in who is susceptible to this. That's when we see the prey. They prey on this victimhood, right? And that's when you were talking about the vibration of victimization, or feeling victimized by authority figures. It's because they recognize the impressionability and they lash out in expression that way, because that negative turmoil of emotion that's going backwards, right? How it expresses is negatively. It doesn't express inspirationally and creatively and positively through their art. It expresses negatively as a backlash or reactivity to their own damaged internal system. I remember that, like I just said, artist standard time in our text message, because artists are like notorious for not being on time. Well, you were working on this production. You had your 8 hours you had to fill. If you have a product, in my opinion, it doesn't matter how long you spent. But someone in management was like, you guys are all supposed to be here at 8 or 9. You're waltzing in at 12. What's going on? And everyone had their own hours, because we're all artists, right? And the only person they came down on was you, because you were like, what, 23, 24, right? And you were very much the like, oh, sure, like, okay, yes, of course, I just want everyone to be happy. And you came in with that, and this person just wreaked havoc all over it, because they could say that to, I mean, and I know a couple other people that are just like very, very crucial to the project, and they hold their own authority. And they might be like, you can ask me to come in, but I'm going to come in when I want, because you can't get rid of me. I know my worth. I know my product. And you were fresh in this industry, and very much, I'm sure, under plenty of lessons where people taught you you're irreplaceable, and I could find anyone, and blah, blah, blah. The same criticisms I ran into when I was a pianist. Don't let anyone down. We'll kill you if you do. You know, that kind of like hard pressure. And they just, the only one that suffered for it was you, because you were the one who was willing to receive it. And a lot of older people, what happens is that they can.
Oh wait. Oh,
Or
okay.
defensive.
Yeah.
And then and then out of that defensiveness, they also repeat the same mistakes of lashing out, because they don't hold their own authority, and like just super weird things. And what's really interesting is that the only way to gain your own authority is to deal with what we talked about last time a little bit, which is, what is the consequence of keeping your own integrity? So if my integrity is coming in at noon because that's what I feel like, and this is what works with my schedule, and I have a dance class at 11. Sorry, I've been doing this for the last 3 years, and now all of a sudden you're coming down with this boundary that has not been in place, you know? And how do I take back my own authority? And it came down to last time we talked about, which was taking the consequence, which for me and in school was, all right, looks like I'm not getting a music degree, because you can't respect me as a musician. And I'm happy I didn't, because I still hear about this guy who tore me to shreds and how he just screams at the orchestra. Just every night they get together to practice, what's wrong with you people? And I'm like, I can understand how I wouldn't take that personally now. It wouldn't upset me, but I'm like, why would I want to participate in a band where that's the dialogue, or an orchestra, you know, like, and then creating that new foundation.
So what she's basically saying is, instead of changing yourself to fit inside in an environment, try finding an environment that suits your best interest. How do you create that? Yeah. I like that you said taking the consequence. There's a difference between being a victim, like, of the consequence, versus consciously opting into receiving the consequence, because
that's the way out of victimization, I feel like. And when you do your inner child work, is you go back and you take the consequence, which a lot of times, almost always, what happens is in every inner child work that I do, taking the consequence. So I learned about authority from my parents, right? And I learned about it from the I can't mentality, which was for me. And the I can't mentality meant you're limited, you this, that's no longer, like, it limits that inspiration, creativity, that forward movement, stops it. It's an absolute, and you take that consequence at that time. You limit your self-inspiration because you want to keep the relationship with your parents. And what happens is you have to be willing to do release that consequence of almost like, I was right, you were wrong. The I was right, you were wrong really comes down to my new definition of authority is me, not you.
Yeah.
You taught me it was you, it's not, it's me. And that's what actually growing into adulthood, I mean, everybody knows every Thanksgiving is like a complete shit show. And usually it's because of all the dynamics regarding family. And so many people are battling growing out of this acknowledgement that I'm right in my own belief, and I don't have to compensate for it because I hold my own authority. And if we may not be able to collaborate, like, that's the consequence, is the collaboration. But then you attract your own collaboration of people. It doesn't have to be that person when you hold your own authority. And you had talked about, like, your mom teaching you authority. Do you have a memory for that, of when you recognized her? Usually you're like around 6 or 7. That's like they call the prime age. There's different books and philosophies that call it, psychology is like anything before the age of 12 is like prime imprinting age, but I know the 7 and 8, like 6, 7, 8 specifically, is the recognition age, where you recognize your surroundings, like, in the mind cognitively, and build the imprinting process. Do you have a memory that, like, and you may not even be able to find it like here, but where you recognized that first point of authority, and this is completion process work will include links.
Immediately my mind goes back to the age of 4. I for some reason remember a lot from the age of 4, where even though that's like
little genius.
Yeah, because a lot of people say that that's it's hard to remember anything before the age of 5. I remember a lot of my preschool life and a lot of my kindergarten life, which is before the age of 5 and 6. And I went to preschool, so I was already dealing with authority figures outside my home, because I had a teacher at that young of an age, and I also remember the environments I was in, so it was not only just preschool.
What was that first? I'm almost feeling like the first big confrontation you had with an adult is where you experienced authority. Do you remember that? Was it with your mom or was it with a teacher?
I feel like, actually, no, it's gonna go before that. I had a babysitter.
Oh, girl!
Yeah,
got it.
And this babysitter, a lot of trauma, came up for me whenever I go back to these times, because all I remember is just a lot of crying at this babysitter's house, and there were other kids, and I remember that these kids, they were really mean and very abusive and very territorial, because I think some of the kids were the babysitter's kids. And
the babysitter's kids are the worst. I've had so many weird things from my babysitter's kids. It was so weird because they held authority, by the way.
Yeah.
Because they got preferential treatment.
Oh yeah. And I remember my sister, she's 3 years older, so she saw a lot of things of how I was being treated, and she wasn't okay with it. She told me protective sister stories too. Yeah, so I would
love them for it.
I would talk to her. I asked her some questions because this came up in therapy recently, and I asked my sister a lot of questions, what was the deal with this babysitter? Because I remember memories of me freaking crying a lot and getting hurt, but I don't remember anything. She was like, oh yeah, this babysitter was just it was pretty abusive. She yelled at you a lot and everything, and then
probably because you listened is the other thing.
Yeah. Because
the people who get victimized the most are usually the most compliant, actually. A lot of times. And that's where the babysitters really get to unleash a lot of their emotional deflection. Or, I'm sorry, the authority gets to unleash a lot of their deflection.
Yeah. I do remember later memories where I wasn't that much of a problem child, but for some reason I kept getting in trouble for things. Yeah. It's just what?
Do you have especially that babysitter that's coming out, do you have a moment where you had a conflict where your sister was not around for almost protective sister things?
I think so, because I think there was a time where she wasn't around, and I think it had to do with me either having a conflict with the other kids or having a conflict with the babysitter. And I remember it ended up in me getting physically hurt or something, mm-hmm. and then crying uncontrollably at. As I'm listening to this, I do remember an incident where I was on a toy car of some sort, and one of the kids, I don't know if it was a babysitter's kids or if it was just another kid that the babysitter was also watching, but they took me by the hair while I was on this car, dragged me off of this car by my hair, and then they threw me up against the wall. So I do remember that. And I think it was an older child that did this all to me just because they wanted the toy or something. I don't remember, but that was pretty traumatic. And then also crying, I think, was also another conflict that came up, because crying is also not always healthy, especially not healthy. I'm not saying it's not healthy. I'm saying in the eyes of people who are usually babysitters or parents, crying is just another quote unquote bratty
you got, so I was going to say, you got physically hurt, and then you had to talk to your babysitter because you got hurt, out playing or something, or you mean
I think I reacted
as part of it.
I think I reacted out of it.
Okay, because I was going to say, because then there's the physical pain, there's the physical hurt of like spanking or something, which is like the consequence, right? But so you're saying this memory kind of, and feel through it because you can't always see it.
Yeah.
But you think you got hurt or something and ended up in an altercation or some sort of confrontation. By the way, anyone who does completion process stuff, like I'm great at navigating my own stuff, but some of this stuff is so early you can't always find it. Like you have to feel it versus finding an actual huge. Sometimes I'm like, is that even a memory? And like you don't know because it's just so early.
For those of you who don't know, the completion process is a healing modality created by Teal Swan. On her website, completionprocess.com, it is defined as a comprehensive approach to healing core traumas that recur as emotional triggers that prevent us from living empowered lives free of fear. The completion process is an 18-step visualization that walks you through an emotional trigger, following the emotion to the earliest memory, then resolving the child's needs through both the mental visualization of resolution and providing awareness through the adult perspective of the events that occurred. Again, that was just read from completionprocess.com. You can go and check the website out yourself if you have any interest about the completion process. And she has also written a book about the entire process. If you would like to also learn more about it, feel free to check it out.
Yeah. So early that it's like you don't even know that was a thing.
Yeah.
You know? But if I'm seeing, and you should go at some point and go back and correct that memory of having the confrontation. Do you think it was the baby? So you got hurt and it involved one of her kids?
Either her, well, I feel like her kids were definitely involved. Any sort of playtime with kids at that age always ended up in some form of conflict or something.
Yeah, because then what you're learning at that point is that your authority figure is not out to protect you.
No.
And the other thing is, I'm sure that you had some authority tied into your sister, but the thing is if you guys are both living under the same boss, you recognize this person, the adult, as the boss. Your sister might be a protector. I'm sure in your own dynamic with your sister, she might be a more authoritative figure, but you really learn that adults are authoritative. And what you learn are, all sorts of weird things is, well, I better not get hurt, or what I call wounded. I call wounds physical wounds, like I accidentally got a cup or something, or I broke my arm, something physical, is I better not get wounded because then this person will be mad at me. It'll disrupt the connection, and you are codependent on this person because they provide you food, they provide you everything, and you're just like terrified if you don't have this person because it's survival and egotistical means. So when that's your fundamental right is something very stupid. People think, I was in babysit. I was babysat. Everyone was babysat. Everyone was spanked. Everyone was this. If that is your core fundamental thing, what you have been taught is that authority figures are literally these kings and queens that you have to have in your life, no matter what wounding you come in contact with, you have to have them. And what my memories would look like if I was to undo something like that is it would be some amount of walking away, or some amount of, you rescue yourself or whatever, but it's the process of detaching that need. I don't need that person. I provide that for myself now, and going through that whole completion of integration all the way through. And then what happens in your workplace is that you recognize, what I recognize whenever I even have this coming up a little bit, I'm supposed to have some meetings with people. Again, no names or specifics, but I'm supposed to have some meetings, and I'm having a lot of insecurity come up because I'm recognizing, hope this person understands I hold my own authority. I'm not here to be authoritative over my students. I'm here to direct them, but I'm not here to take the responsibility for them. I trust them to do that. That's important. Because I hold my own authority, I'm here to teach them to do it too. I don't have a lot of trust in authority figures, and I'm battling that because I'm recognizing I'm at a place in my life where I have to collaborate. I have to collaborate musically. I have to collaborate, especially regarding parents and networking. I'm parents have to like who I am. And of course, I feel like I have great relationships with the parents for the most part of my students. But even further, if I'm going into business meetings where you're getting involved with money and websites and, marketing and all of this, We cannot be at odds whatsoever that because someone has basically a piece of your pie, therefore they are authoritative. Absolutely not. Under no circumstance are you the authority over me, regardless of what you are providing. And if you think about that in a collaborative environment for music, right? I have piano, we have a drummer, let's see, little person on bongos, little person singing something, okay? Because you are the singer does not make you more authoritative than the drummer or the piano. And if you think that, what's going to happen is we just don't want to work for you. I can create my own music elsewhere. But how would you create an environment that brings you, like us, to current your job right now? What are you dealing with, and what have you even thought about the type of environment or how to create it for art? And where are you going now with that, like professionally with art, where you can hold your own authority?
So, do you have a more straightforward version of that question?
Yeah. And this is really grounding work. I've been doing so much.
This is that literally.
By the way, I'm so ungrounded of a human being. So all these are new lessons to me about how to physically be productive, the productivity thing. But this really is an aspect of productivity. What action are you looking to take? You've talked about tattooing, right? And tattooing is a field where you would be the tattoo artist, your audience would come to you, see what you have to offer, request, you would accept or deny, but it's really very independent. You could be at any shop and hold your own authority, right? And this is the aspect of contracting work, which is what I really like. I really am not a fan of the W-2 employee at this point because it limits your authority. I didn't end up working, actually, I'll use music and arts name. But they asked me to come back, and I was like, cool, I'm going to need in writing that you acknowledge because they wanted me to fill out a W-2, and I was like, I'm going to need in writing that you acknowledge I run my own business, and this is not a conflict of interest, and I never heard from them again. And I'm like, you're trying to take away my authority. I'm not okay with it, you know? So my business is I independently contract, same thing. The audience comes to me, and then I work independently in home, and I will probably run out of home lessons here pretty quick at some point. But what environment, you have some tattooing, what other environments do you know of, are you curious about, even that you would recommend to some students if they run into collaborative-based issues? And you're I feel like you are very authoritative because you work different shows. It's like, so if a show is bad, the season ends and you don't go back the next season, right? So I do feel like you actually work very authoritatively.
Yeah.
But you're even looking, but even between us, when we've talked more like friendship based, you have been talking about even getting more authoritative because you're just recognizing your own self-power. Like you're just like, wow, I am authoritative. I still want more of a base for my own art, for my own expression, where I can say yes and no, and I don't have to feel guilty, and I'm not run ragged 10 hours out of the day, that whole thing that's going on now. What environment? So tattooing was when you asked, what's the example? I'm like, well, tattooing's an example. Do you have any others? And it's totally fine if you don't. If you're just like, that's why I'm stuck, then, that's why you're stuck.
So, I guess the current environment that I'm in right now, as far as my one of the productions that I'm on, every single time I start a new production or on a new show, I do have to go back in time to the times where I had less personal power and I had less boundaries, and I remember like the how it wasn't serving me in those environments. So in this current environment right now, since it's a new show and we basically every new show you have to kind of navigate the pipeline together, try to get the structure for everyone working for everyone, and so that the structure makes every person's job easier. So I remember in the beginning, the fact that they were having me work in a different program was already something that I had to work with my boundaries around, because I was like, okay, if you're going to have me work in a program that is a lot harder than this program, which is what everybody is used to using in this industry, and it's the one program I've always used. If you're gonna have me come out of that and do something that's going to take a little bit more time and require a little bit more work, and also the file process out of it like is much more hellish than using the easier program, I was like, you're going to have to collaborate with me on how to make everybody, as an artist, it's important to ask or figure out ways how to make your job easier. Because if they want a specific product from you, especially with the hours that you are working, they do have to collaborate with you on how to make your life a lot easier. Because
so that
otherwise,
you can produce that product.
Yeah, and you can also produce quality over just quantity. You know, you don't like quantity is great, but if they expect a specific quality out of you, then they have to collaborate with you on how to make that easier for yourself. So there was a few things that I had to collaborate with on my team. I remember telling them that if they're going to have me work in this program, I am not going to export certain files, because I work with the character designers a lot. And I said that like if we're going to exchange files back and forth, I want this file format. I will not give this file format to everybody because it makes my work a lot harder. And if you're going to have me do that, I suggest we hire a production assistant that takes care of nothing but exporting files, all the digital stuff, you know? And they they considered that. They're like, okay, like if it starts getting too complicated, we'll have another assistant, because sometimes coordinating like file structure or organization in itself, that's why we have production coordinators. Their job is literally the organization of a production. So they take care of all of the files, they organize all of the files, they give the files to the artist, they receive the files from the artist, and then they give it to the next, like the animation studios, because that's
this is totally brilliant, because like with the tattooing, we talked about switching fields, right? But the path that I took was complete escapism, which is where I guess I'm not going to school. I guess I'm not becoming a piano player. I guess I'm not doing this. I guess I can't afford piano lesson. Like I was constantly quitting things. And what you're saying is like, you're holding in this work environment, you're holding your boundaries and your authority by being like, oh, super logical. If you would like me to produce a product, because they value your product, and then they're telling you how to do it. And you're like, okay, well, I can do this. Like I can learn, it'll be a pain in the butt. I can learn this new program, but when it comes to this file exporting, like the amount of work that it takes is unreliable, and neither one of us will get things done. And then they were like, oh, cool. So you immediately were holding that authority, even after you left that old, production. You're like, this isn't the right work environment. The new production that you came on to, you held your authority from the beginning, and it sets a tone.
Yeah. And what makes it, what turns things into a collaborative process versus just being difficult to work with is, giving ideas all the time. So whenever I ran into a problem in my team environment, I didn't just like say, hey, this is a problem, and then let it be, and then demand that it get fixed. I actually was like, this is a problem I'm noticing. Is there any way that we can maybe do it this way, or maybe this way, or like how would the other artists feel, like the people who get my files after me, or how would the character designers feel, which are the people who make the files before me, because there's an order of things. And we would always often talk with each other and ask each other like, what's the easiest for everybody, and they would also give their insight and everything. So that's what turns into an environment that you're in from not only like taking your power back, but also like doing it in a sense where you're taking everybody's best interests as well, not just yourself.
Well, and that's what managers, that's what authority figures are supposed to be doing. One thing that's interesting, I always had an issue with authority, is that most of my authority figures didn't have my best interest. And I ran into that up until the point that I recognized I had my best interests, and that it was okay to have taken the escapism path was, I'm now okay with, like I don't regret in any way. Like dropping out of college was one of the choices I was very insecure about for a long time, because I thought it was like a representation of failure. But I was like, no, I don't want to collaborate with these people. I didn't actually like anyone. It wasn't because I was stupid. you know? And it was so cool because what you were talking about is when you're in a position where you held your authority from the beginning, what a good authoritative figure says is it's not like, oh, you're doing this and I'm feeling victimized. You were like, actually, that what you recommended creates a very big difficulty for both of us. It doesn't allow things to move smoothly. And when you're focused on that product, they see that it's not personal. They're like, oh, and you have my best interest. And they start to value you because they recognize your part to play. Something interesting about taking the consequence, like in this situation, is you understood what you were walking in with, like the power that you had in your productivity. You understood your own values as an artist. You've been around the block a couple times, right? And treated not so nicely. And the job that I had recently where I was working for a different music, so I work independently now, but I was working for a music store. Something that was interesting is that if I spoke up in any way, the manager would threaten to withhold my paycheck. And he also made other things that were like very commonly known not okay. Like this was a guy who said it was not okay for me to wear pants because I was a woman. And he had a specific like religious affiliation that he was very, very old school, and he didn't even recognize that is like sexist. And it was said so to somebody else to tell me. And that type of authority was like, well, what's the consequence? One, with that level of thinking, it's obviously unreasonable. So, and then the second thing was if I did stand up, he had been multiple times like withheld my paycheck, which is unlawful, but then if you challenge it, you get fired. So the best thing to do at that point was to like, okay, thank you, and recognize that was not a place where I was able to hold my own authority at that time. And you've ran into that too, where you weren't able to hold your authority, but then this is a place where you attracted the right work environment with your new like authority intact, right? And then even then too, at this environment, you're still moving forward and getting more and more of that self-empowerment where you're like, oh yeah, I feel like are doing better than obviously in the past at these other places where it was just seriously like not socially acceptable things. And even here, you're like, okay, cool. Now I still want better for myself. You know, I don't know, do you want to work on this this production again, or are you still transforming that idea further to a different environment?
To answer this question, I feel like my overall goal in the future is to eventually work my way out of a 9-to-5 lifestyle and work my way out of this industry and become more of an entrepreneur or more of a personal business kind of entity, and to be able to produce more of my own personal art or any kind of creative endeavors. Because I know at heart, I feel as though the industry or the 9-to-5 life is not something for me that I want to do for the rest of my life. But I do have a lot of negative belief systems surrounding the fact that I feel tied down to the 9-to-5 life, and I feel dependent on the 9-to-5 life, and I feel if I am not in the 9-to-5 life that I can't make as much money or as much of a prosperous living. And I also feel as though it's harder to build a personal business from the ground up, especially at this point in time, considering everything that's what we've been going through as a collective. But these are all belief systems that I'm aware of that I'm trying to change. I'm trying to tell myself these are limiting belief systems and anything is possible. And I'm trying to learn that it is possible to create a life outside of this system. And you can definitely live prosperously in no matter what you do. So it's a matter of training my mind that. But in the meantime, since I have been a part of this system, I definitely have manifested better environments for myself. And a big one has been working from home. For me, COVID, in a sense, was kind of a blessing because for many years I was wishing that I would be able to work from home because I felt like the drive every single day and working in an office environment got very depressing for me. and it just wasn't working for me. So it works for some other people. Some people like that social environment, and to see people every day, and they love that office life. For me personally, it's nothing personal on anybody else, and like, it's not that I don't want to see people or whatever. It's just, I'm just happier in my own space. And also driving for many years of my life has brought a lot of anxiety and has ruined my day. And I've always lived far from work, and I never wanted to live near work. Like, I never really wanted to live in Burbank area or North Hollywood area, just because it's not the area I even feel happy in or prefer to be in. So I feel as though working from home has been another thing that I have worked towards to suit my best interests. And thanks to COVID and to awareness of mental health, it is something that I plan on setting my boundaries on in the future, even hopefully, knock on wood, like post-COVID, after this is all over. Hopefully it's gonna end soon. I do plan on telling productions that I work with that I will only work from home. I will not work in an office. If it's absolutely necessary and they need me in, I will make it maybe 1 or 2 days a week, but that is that. So this is a new set of boundaries that I have. And I'm a lot happier, and my mental well-being is a lot healthier. You kind of brought up an overall concept that I feel like I can touch base on, and it's something I've learned throughout all of my productions. I've learned from the comparison of the production from the very first show that I worked on to the current one right now. And the overall theme, I noticed what helped me come back to my own authority and in control of my own life again and my boundaries is, this is going to sound kind of messed up in a bit to some degree, but this has to do, I want everyone to like think about this as far as their work life goes. So this is the area of their life where like, you may be doing something that you love, or you may not be doing something that you love, but it's for the sake of getting that paycheck so you can do more things that you love. So for me, work has eventually become this form of basically a job that I now do, not because I love it, but because it is something that gives me money to do things that I love. And I've had to come to terms with that. Recognizing that helps a lot because you start to prioritize where you want to focus your energy on in your life, and how much you're doing so. And then also for work, like you're able to set better boundaries down when you do so. So the one thing I noticed that hindered me in my work life was making social connections beyond the project itself. So whenever I started like developing relationships, personal relationships with these people, it hindered me in the long run. Because
this is so what I'm dealing with right now.
Yeah, because these people, if your focus is on something other than the project itself, so this can mean like a freaking chat in the kitchen, or going out to lunch with these people, and then like actually talking and hanging out with each other and learning what who you really are as people. Not only is this kind of dangerous in a sense for the project itself, but it's kind of I mean, it's not dangerous. I don't want to say it's dangerous because this is amazing. It's a way to like work on yourself.
Let me think of some new words. It's terrible. It's assured to fail. Hold on. It's treacherously painful. Wait, hold on. What is it?
Yeah, it's an opportunity for you to basically always, like, whenever you're gonna have a relationship with somebody, I'm not saying relationship as partnership, I'm saying like friendships too.
Like the way that you relate to other humans on the planet, I guess.
It's always going to be an opportunity for you to learn something new about yourself, or learn of basically be aware of how you were traumatized as a kid, and the way to navigate that is like how people make you feel threatened in certain environments. So like, I don't know if you've ever like, made friends with certain coworkers, and then those relationships started to conflict started to arise because of your connections to these people, not because of the project itself. Because imagine if you didn't know these people at all, but you all focused on the project itself. There would be less judgment as to like why anything is going wrong in the production, because oftentimes when something starts going wrong in a production and we're all friends with these people are like, you know, they can hop into their ego mind, and they're like, oh, you know, this person's not doing so well right now with their job because they're too this, or they're like this, and like all these judgments that they're just, you know, throwing outside themselves. And not only that, they themselves are getting into survival mode because something outside of themselves is threatening. Like every single time we come across conflict in a production or in a team, you know, it's kind of a threat a little bit to our survival, depending on how you approach it. Like if it's something that's triggering you, like, and it's starting to make you doubt yourself, or it's starting to make you angry, like any like negative emotions that come up from it, we fall into, if we're not conscious about it, we fall into pure survival mode, where we just we either fight or flight, you know, we either like have head-on resistance with the issue or the people, or we can or we straight up just like get scared and we don't want to deal with it. So overall the main theme I found that was difficult was establishing connections with people in my work environment. And I noticed that the more connections I made with people, the more because I have a problem, the more I would battle my dynamic with my own authority figures as a kid. I suffer from being a codependent. So I would have a lot of narcissistic figures in my life. And it would basically, I would have to battle authenticity pretty much. Like I would always find myself giving up aspects of myself and shaming aspects of myself just to please these people in this environment.
To get along in the workplace.
To be liked.
It's like, because if you're friends and you're authentic and someone doesn't like something, it affects your livelihood now. And so you might as well just kind of like vanilla appease or whatnot.
And when you have those feelings at the end of the day, doesn't it make the work a lot more difficult?
Well, and it's because you're trying to compensate. What's so interesting as you were talking about the work dynamics, I'm dealing with this personally, like right on the head, like huge conflict in the last week. And it has to deal with the way that you work, the way that you're working with these people, and also that you're personally involved with. And I'm finding that my purpose and my product and my personal alignment with it isn't the same as theirs, which shouldn't technically matter. But when you take that connection to your product, which is right in front of you, and which is a reflection of your expression and your connection with yourself, and you look up and start to connect to the people instead of the product, you start to feed off of each other's energy in that way. And it does get very difficult, because the minute you guys have a disagreement, and especially depending on what I'm finding is that you really rely on how hard this other person can process, and how hard you can process your own insecurities and your own emotional weirdness, like because you're starting to connect on a heart wavelength. And it's so hard, because I'm finding that I do this actually with parents. I connect with them really well, but I have to be careful about not getting too personal, because to be perfectly honest, like I have a lot of things that would trigger, especially like when we talk about spirituality, a lot of ways that I live would be very disagreeable personal things. And because we live in a condemning nature, which means when I disagree, when we talk about cancel culture, like I disagree, therefore you're condemned. Therefore, you know, and that is a very old religious practice that I was raised with, which is, your virtue system isn't the same as mine, and you're not actually tuning into the intention of the heart. You're tuning into the action, not the intention behind it, and your meaning to the action, not theirs. And then you're judging it, you're disrupting the connection, you're reacting to it, and you're condemning it, because most people don't actually go towards their triggers. They run from them. And then that's where you get spiraling, which is just karma. Stuff just keeps showing up in your life again and again. And something interesting for me in that work environment is, one, I quit a very big collaborative plan, we shall say, recently, and it had to do with a looming pressure of being constantly emotionally disappointing. It had to do with the fact that emotionally, socially, I was not buying into what another coworker or more than one coworker wanted from me. I was there to show up. I loved my product. I actually very much love these people, but because there was like a necessity for me to partake in a certain consciousness that I wasn't enabling codependence. Actually, it made me look very careless. That's what I was thinking. It made me look very careless, very checked out, very like emotionally wishy-washy and this and that. And that was because I couldn't partake in it. There wasn't an action that I could take that would have been positive towards our collaboration. And what's interesting I'm finding about collaborative work environments is that sometimes actually having that commonplace collaboration allows you to focus sideways than the intimacy of the heart. And the intimacy of the heart, it's not that it is exclusive in a way, meaning that there is a lot of filtration that goes on before you let people into your personal space. And that's okay, because you have to test their virtue system. And what I was finding in this environment was, I was like, the first time you run into disappointment, I am condemned. That means you can no longer be in my personal field. It's nothing personal, but I can't have that. That hurts. So I actually just kind of bounce it right back out. Is the fact, and I don't attract it. I end up disattracting all these situations. Things were coming up, emergencies were coming up where I was unable to commit my time to our project. And it was just because it was like everything about that condemning nature. I don't condemn myself. So we were just like completely, you end up in emotional disagreements because people actually want to be codependent by nature. Like most people on the planet think that that's what love is actually codependence. The codependence lesson is slowly but surely coming, but you and I are actually pretty ahead of the game at this point on this one, which is the codependence. It's almost like what it feels like is a certain amount of debt. So when you think about what debt feels like, it's you owe me something. That's codependence. You owe me something, and if this connection is going to be jeopardized and you're freaking the holy bejesus out, that means that there's something there that you need from this connection that you're not providing for yourself, that basically you need to go through the completion or the death process of. This person cannot hold the responsibility for that feeling of fear that you have. If this person's gone, then this. And what I'm finding too in my personal romantic relationship, which is really a very, very, very intimately joining of the heart, is that constantly, your entire life, you're finding out these codependent points. And you're getting used to them, and you're becoming okay with them and working them out. And you constantly are coming to terms in these little unions, and then constantly coming through these like separations, which is interesting. And they're disagreements. Like the most common disagreements I had to do with like a vacation. And my partner's like, I think I'm going to go on a vacation. And I was like, we just talked about investing all of this money into our condo and doing some stuff. And for me, it doesn't really matter. I'm like, we just have to put it on halt, you know? But I didn't have a necessity like, if we don't get the water filter, I don't know what I'll do. You know, like, I was like, okay, is this a priority? And it was interesting because the minute I was like, at first, like, there was always an inkling like, I thought we were going to do this. We're not. Okay, I immediately let go. I've become so habitual at letting go of that expectation. Like, okay, we need to cater our money and our focus towards this. And what was so funny is the reaction was like, oh yeah, we had a lot of energy put up behind this project and I just let it all go. And I'm like, yeah, but that's okay if it's important. And he was like, well, I realize it's not important. It's a vacation. And I'm like, I mean, that's okay. Yeah, like, that's kind of how I feel. That's why I haven't gone on vacation, you know? And then it was just like, never mind. And it was like so quick. Like that's how the conflicts are coming up, is that we both navigate and trust that reactivity in each other. And at a point of like disappointment, right? when I was disappointed that we couldn't get the water filter in that moment because there was a different choice point that needed to be made in our project of our life, that releasing of that expectation is the trust. I understand that this person would not jeopardize. If he needs to go on vacation, it's for something very important. I immediately register that. And that's been through tons of practice, tons of reactivity, tons of fighting actually, and tons of acceptance that comes after that. And in your work environment, if you are in a really a low conscious, low vibrational community of people that the first time you disappoint them ever, they can't hold it together, your project falls apart immediately. And what you have to look at is cool, what project's coming in?
Yeah.
You have to look at your project. And what's interesting about my projects musically, I'm recognizing is I have been creating space more and more, is that I've been avoiding practice. And I was actually codependent on other musical outlets because I didn't want to sit and do the work here. It was I was sitting and it was so dureless work. And in the last 3 days, I've been able to sit and create time for that focus. And I've been able to sit and create time for my new project, which is actually my skill set, which is actually the foundation of my creativity. But it had to do with a certain amount of being unmotivated, uninspired, and I was codependent for my inspiration on almost supporting other people who did what I wanted to do, instead of putting forth the effort. And then I'll have another YouTube comedy video coming out about releasing tolerance. That was so big, dude. I could not focus on anything. And I was joking about ADHD, which I have anyways, but focus was, I couldn't tolerate focus. And tolerance, I wrote this down because it's on my notes to do a thing. Tolerance is the emotional repression method in response to unfairness. So tolerance, when you have to tolerate something, that means that something was unfair and you better deal with it. And you repress immediately. And then you are taught that patience is continuous tolerance.
Yeah.
And then you grow up and you're old and fat and miserable and tolerating everything in your life.
Patience is something that
patience is a virtue.
Yeah.
It's tolerance or emotional repression is a virtue. It's hold on, I was undoing all that and it was so funny, but I literally could not tolerate the unfairness that was brought about. So it was interesting. I found tolerance. I don't remember. It had to do with sharing. It was the first time I had to share something, something super stupid, from your childhood. It's understand that traumas don't mean you were necessarily abused. It's just what you learned from the situation. And it's sharing a toy. I had to share a toy and it was very much this person's turn, and I was what? That's not fair, because I didn't want to register. I didn't understand collaboration. I was never taught collaboration. You were taught you have this teacher, right, with a room full of 400 kids, and they're just trying to kind of make the day go by. You just don't have the time to teach people emotional awareness, nor did they probably know any better. And I was taught to emotionally suppress. You have to give up your desires and your wants because that's what's fair to this person. And if you want them to be your friend, you better suppress it. So I was okay. And then I did that the rest of my life.
Oh my God, no. Sharing is one of the biggest misconceptions that from our old paradigm, that we did all wrong when we were children. I remember so many instances where when I was little, my mom always labeled me as very bratty because I had a problem with sharing with other people. But what I recognized later on as an adult, I was never allowed to have any emotional needs, and I was never allowed to have any boundaries. So out of the result of this programming as a young child, if say a young child is has their toy and everything, and the authority figure's all right, you need to give up that your favorite toy and let somebody else play with it, because sharing is caring. And when that toy is something that you absolutely love and is your everything.
Projection,
yeah.
You projected all this, yeah.
So basically the authority figure is telling you you need to give up this love that you have for this one thing, and then also you're not allowed to feel any certain way about it, because sharing is more caring than how you feel about it.
And by the way, something I want to put in here, because I have something showing up that's really important, especially for parents. It's not I've written some parenting book, nor do I have any children except for dogs. when you think about being an authority figure, like a parent, and trying to teach your kids emotions and like all of the crap that comes along with it, right? It's like, one, you will never do it right. But number two, if I had to think, I'm a parent in this moment, okay, and I was going to teach my child how to share, I would teach them to still love what isn't theirs. So I would be like, it's time for you to give this to your sister. I'm sure there's some sort of reactivity. You sit with the child that's having the reactivity and you show them, like, what do you like about that toy? So they get to experience it by not having it. And that is what I think sharing is actually experiencing your own love without having it. And that is actually breaking the codependence. That's actually breaking the most codependent relationship I had. I'll have to tell you, girl, there was some weird synchronistic crap that showed up with that. And one of my exes, I will talk about the most codependent relationship, totally ran into him. Super weird. We didn't really say anything. We both laughed, actually, because he's a funny guy. But the sharing aspect or the breaking that codependence is loving the relationship even though you don't have it. And people don't, what they do is they don't know how to do that, so they resent. Just, I don't know, until they're dead. Like, that's just what ends up happening is you do, well, instead of that, now I have this relationship. Instead of understanding, like, what I've come to terms with is that I have my relationship now that I would not give up. But I still love that relationship. And I think it's funny. What happened was this person, I'm driving along, and he had texted me for the first time in, I don't know, 2 years, you know? He texted me about, because he thought that I was organizing some dance events, because we're dancers, right? We're both ballroom dancers. And he thought I was organizing some stuff while COVID was going on. I was like, hey, I didn't want to, because I didn't want to, get arrested. So I chose not to. And he was like, okay, well, I'm driving along. He pulls up in his car next to him. And I just look, he's in a new car. So it's not like I'd even recognize the car. And I'm like, I just looked and like laughed, and he was laughing, he was totally laughing like super hard, and I was too. I was just like, why? And he knows, like, both of us are like, universe, you know? And he was like, hey, and I was like, and then we both like just totally got a good laugh, and I just drove away, you know? And that was the end of it. And it was super funny because actually what was and I had a different trigger show up for something else, but we both appreciated, like, the moment. We both appreciated it. It was like a totally funny thing, you know? And I was like, all right, you know?
Yeah.
And it wasn't something that I didn't resent it, actually. I didn't have, like, some sort of, here's this person that I don't have showing up. Because all of the things that I had in that relationship, the codependence at that time, I had already filtered out over a very long grieving process. But I had already done that when you talk about the parts work, where you recognize the codependencies, tiny little codependencies that were in that relationship. And I think even afterwards, I found one more. I was like, that was weird. And then I was like, oh, because I had like a certain sense of like love, come up. I was like, oh, that's so good that one time.
So, I want to hear how you reframe everything differently when you hear this approach to the problem that we just talked about sharing. So I did watch a parenting video of this person that I follow on YouTube. If I remember to, I can link her channel down below. She's really good because she comes from like a therapy standpoint, and her channel is called The Parenting Junkie. So it is heavily into parenting. So she talks about a solution to this whole sharing is caring problem.
Oh, cool.
And her solution is, she talks about how with her own child, before the friends come over to play and everything, she has a talk with a child, and she's like, so there's going to be other kids coming over, or even if they're not friends, sometimes they're just family members that like the child has to kind of like, even though I don't like that family member, unfortunately, we're gonna have to spend some time, So,
unfortunately, it's Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And we still took over the nation. So
she has a talk with the child saying, so there's going to be other children that are going to come over, and they're going to potentially want to play with your toys. So what I want you to do is I want you to go through your toys, pick out the ones that are your absolute favorite, that you absolutely love, that you don't trust anyone else with these toys, or you just don't want anyone to play with these toys. I want you to take them and go hide them in your room so they don't have to touch it. And what this teaches
really
the
helpful.
child is that they can have have others, but have me too. It's teaching the child that they don't have to lose aspects of themselves to have relationships with other people. They can have themselves and have other people too.
Right.
Because when with the problem with sharing is caring is that toy is like an aspect of themselves. It's kind of like an extension of themselves because they've projected so much of their love onto it. And with the whole sharing is caring concept, you are teaching this child that in order to care for others and give other people a chance, you have to abandon all of your needs and your emotional needs and your boundaries and yourself. You have to like give up this aspect of yourself to have this relationship with this other person. And boy, a lot of trauma came from my childhood, especially from preschool, because I do remember the whole concept coming up constantly where like I was very territorial. I was like, no, like this is how I want to play with things. These are the toys that I'm playing with right now. Like, why can't I play with it for as long as I want to? And I was always shamed and condemned and being called the brat because I did not want to share. But in reality, when it came down to it, like from my household, I constantly had to give up aspects of myself to please my parents or like please my sister. I was never able to just have something for myself without that threat being there that it's going to be taken away from me. And my mom, like God bless her soul, she has a heart for all children. So growing up, you know, she had this like part where like, oh, she would see me not playing with something anymore and then she would give it away because she was like, oh, I didn't see you play with it anymore. So like, and this child could definitely be happier from it, but I like never got to say goodbye nor like know that
or even
it was
acknowledge it. It was just it's just like energy. You don't have your own space. It's just being romped all over.
So there was like, I remember a memory where I had this cousin. She was younger than me, and I started not liking spending time with her more and more and more as time went on because I constantly had to, like, my mom constantly gave my stuff to her and like wanted to shower this child with love, and it was directed all towards her to the point where like my mom started like I had a couple sweatshirts. I remember specifically they were sweatshirts that were very, very hard to find because they had Sonic on them. And I was like a huge Sonic fan and it was hard to find any merch anywhere. So I like loved those sweatshirts to death, even though I grew out of them immensely because like I think it was like a couple years later or something and like I grew in size. That was like the growth spurt stage when you're little. And I remember my mom gave this merch to this cousin, and without asking me if that was okay. But I had so much love and obsession for these these pieces of clothing that has energy because I wore it, you know, it's mine. It was a part of me, and what it had on it was something that was also like even more of an obsession of mine that I had, you know, that I felt like was a part of me as well. And I felt like, you know, she was essentially felt like she was taking Sonic away from me. Like I had to like break that relationship that I had with like, you know, this character.
That projection. Yeah, projection's a whole nother one, which is like we always continue projecting. Like the way that we have like dolls and stuffed animals, we do that then later to our kids. And it has to do with taking our power back. The more that you take your empowerment back, I'm at such a strange place, actually. I probably will have kids, I feel like. That's my feeling. But I have taken back a lot of projection that's very strange because I'm like, I don't really feel like a projected need to. I don't have that projection, I guess you could say, where those aspects of yourself have been pinned onto the different elements, understanding that it comes back from you, and doing that whole lesson of what projection actually is. That was a good lesson. That was a good lesson for me, because you do it on your partners all the time.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's where it came. That's where it showed up for me the first time I learned about projection, actually, as it caused a really big rift because I didn't know I was doing it. And I recognized it very quickly because I don't get mad. And I don't think I've ever been like, I was so rageful. I was like rageful. And I was like, dude, I never have this type of reactivity, like where it's just fuming, like fire through the roof, you know?
Because you were never allowed to.
And it was, yeah. And it that was the thing, is that it had to do, I had a very high projection of like love. And it was very interesting. And something else that you brought up that, because I wanted to tackle real quick too, that was cool, is like in your personal relationships, you were talking about how, what did you say? You said something specific, but it was about sharing. It was about in regards to sharing and how you can share toys, but they don't have to be your most intimate, right? And it's the same thing. If you take that projection back to the most intimate parts of yourself, like one thing that we do when we're younger, I think, is we throw everything out there because we just have like no self-control. And as you get older, you almost become more and more introverted, and it's about sharing in trusting environments with those who can actually hold your vulnerability. Every time you share something, you make yourself vulnerable. And those who are actually most desperate for self-love will throw the most out into the space. They will over-invest. And I used to do this all the time. This had to do with, again, my projection and things. And it's really cool because I've been battling how to maintain healthy friendships the way that I want to, by not compromising myself. But I think it comes down to being okay with the level of intimacy that you do share. It's not about what you don't share. It's about what you do share. And this also came up. I had a really good talk with a childhood friend. He was actually one of my teachers. And we've been he also lives in Vegas, and I don't have family out here. So we see each other like family every so often, catch up, I haven't seen you in a couple months. How's it going? Let's go out to lunch, that kind of thing. And I had like a really good, fundamental religious talk, because I have a lot of trauma there regarding what religion is. And what I was taught was very much like, anytime I've told anybody this, everyone who goes to church or is part of a community is like, oh no, that's not what the church is about. It's very funny. What I was taught was not at all what was meant or what was supposed to be communicated, but it had to do with sharing yourself in those communities. And what I'd been projected on a lot and over-invested in this space where I had no space to breathe. I had no space to be myself, to be authentic, right? And, and you can talk about this in your friendship group or your work community, but it's about slowly investing and throwing out. And if someone doesn't value the work that you are putting in, day by day, you can't fully invest yourself because you understand that this person or this environment is taking advantage, that you're not on the same page. That usually what happens is that your authority figure is not as self-fulfilled, and they are looking for you to fulfill it. And it really, what work I think is supposed to do when they talk about professionalism is provide a position in which the product, you guys are both on the same page of what this product is supposed to look like. And you guys have trust in each other that this product will be. And how you develop that trust is by continuous production of this product, And if you're producing and you're like, wow, this looks great. And this person's like, no, it doesn't. It looks like crap. It's like, you stop investing and you reevaluate whether you're supposed to be here or not. And maybe you're like, oh, you know what? I've been distracted. Or you're like, nah, this is good. You're deflecting from your weird failing marriage onto my work because I'm A, B, C, D, the most accessible, who knows,
Oh yeah.
Is what it is. But yeah, that's pretty good stuff there about sharing, man. I would like to include the link for the parenting channel, actually, because I would like to follow that as a teacher because I'm an authority figure. And what's really cool is I don't see the kids enough that they have a lot of trust in me, but they don't know me well enough to have really built resentment. To be honest, we're with each other for an hour a week. We do really cool, fun stuff, and then I exit the house. So all I represent is just a ton of fun.
Yeah.
And if they had to be with me for any length of time, that we would have to go through the disagreements that parents actually have to go through. And what I'm trying to do between parents and kids is get them more collaboratively based. And music is cool because I can be like, look, we're playing piano, it's for the recital. But the whole exercise they're doing is how to overcome resentment in the product, product between them. And this mom who's doing the contract signing, she's so cool, man. She's super neat. It's actually really interesting because both her and her daughter are like incredible human beings. And actually what I see is her daughter is threatened by the balancing that the mom possesses. The mom is very balanced, and I think the daughter is just coming into sensitivity for the first time. And she feels like because she is sensitive to all these aspects and reactive to them, and her mom is not, she feels that separation. And it's kind of cool because by putting the daughter in the authority, it then makes her responsible. And now she's going to be, but she's never had someone identify that first, and hopefully, like when millennials start running the world, and as long as they do come into their own responsibility of building their own projects, they won't abuse their power, and they won't abuse their authority. I think that's going to be, I don't know where you're going. I know that you are in a huge job shift, and I can feel mine's more like expansion. I feel this boom of expansion, but I've already got it. I feel like you're in like a very big shift in environment right now that's going to be the boom of your expansion.
Yeah, I think the one thing that we all should take as far as like where we're headed as a society and what's healthy for us, even as artists, I think it's very important in your own family life, to recognize that just because I notice even just when you start to take back your power or you start to become your own authority in any relationship, oftentimes to the older generations, it will be a threat in itself. So for example, with my mom, this actually echoes into a lot of relationships, but it always comes back down to my mom.
Both of our moms are going to watch this and be like,
oh, she already knows all of this anyways, because I always like talk about it and stuff. And if she comes up,
my mom would be curious.
If she has any resistance towards it, it's because it's something that she needs to work out with, in her own life. So, I'm compassionate towards her, and that, and I always tell her, it's not me hating you, it's just me figuring out, why I am the way that I am, and trying to just heal from it, from anything that has resistance. But, every single time I would gain more authority or get better at boundaries, or having more self-trust and stepping more into my authenticity, all this stuff is related. I would have my mom, or anybody outside of myself condemn me in some way or call me some sort of thing, or I'll be a representation of someone that has gone wrong or whatever. So in my family life, my mom multiple times would always shame me and tell me, oh, she's having that attitude, she's going through a phase, she's no longer the little Sabrina that I used to know. All these things.
The attitude was real with this one. The attitude.
She's grown. Yeah. So basically, I never went through that teenager rebel phase that my sister went through. And whenever I hear rebel phase, I think of this child is stepping into their power. They're starting to actually develop boundaries.
Yes.
But to others, it's this person is rebelling. They are hormone raging. They're going through the things.
The kind of excuses as to why they're being their own person. Yeah.
Yeah. So millennials, hopefully, or even the generation after us, when we're the ones who are running the world, like you said, because our age is coming soon, where most of us that are in these higher positions are former millennials. Hopefully we'll start to learn how to shape our lives where we will, if someone's not thinking like ourselves or not exactly like us, we can still have an open-mindedness and a level of respect to them being the way they are.
Well, we can evaluate why. What's so exciting about the new generation that I love is everything they're doing is in response to their environment, and working in behavior for such a long time with kids and dogs and everything. It's fascinating because I can see everything that they're responding to. And what's interesting is people are like, oh, especially to be perfectly honest, especially with sexual psychology. the older generation is freaking out based on what's going on with the sexual psychology of the youth. And what freaks them out is they think that they're going to have to do away with some belief system they have. And what's really interesting is that you don't have to do away with the belief system that you had of love. That has nothing to do with it. It's always, love and separation and whatnot. But you also have to trust that this person is responding to something you did wrong. And if you find it, you'll be able to accept them and they will be able to accept you. It starts with you. And what's interesting too, when I look at the younger generation, I see that a lot of specifically decision making in this category. I had a student who was very, very young, super young, elementary school, dating. I don't know how physically involved she was, to be perfectly honest. It would probably make any parent cringe, the things that she told me. And I was like, all for it, man. I was like, yeah, go get it. Woohoo. Because the thing is that she's never going to ever be able to answer her own questions unless she has someone push her in the direction that she wants to go. And the direction she wanted to go, I didn't agree with in any sense of the word. But you have to understand, one, the direction she was going was not dangerous physically. She's not going to try heroin. She's not, it was not physically based is the other thing in any way. The concepts she was talking about were dangerous concepts to parents. Nothing was in any way physically harmful whatsoever. And I was like, the thing is, though, is that she's not going to answer these questions. And a lot of what was coming up was actually sexual identity and dissatisfaction. And she was seeking external validation. I need my parents to accept me. I need this person to accept me. This person does accept me, but they're too much. They're obsessed with me. And it was just all these complete relationship imbalances. And I was like trying to get her to the point that like personal acceptance is what it comes down to. And that you're allowed to do whatever the heck you want when you're later in life. The thing is, what you're trying to do is just figure out how to love people. I can see that, And it was, and the thing is that she has no one to talk to about this. It is very, very, very new age concepts. And if you deny that altogether in the beginning, what happens is you immediately encourage that age discrimination, the rift between young people and old people. And what you do is you put down their ideas. And when you do that, anything that they think from then on out, they don't trust you with. And it has nothing to do with that decision that they made at that time. Now it's everything. You just started to stereotype for your for the millennial old generation, which is the same as the generation before us, which is I'm right, you're wrong, I'm big, you're little, I'm smart, you're dumb. Like that's the whole thing. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? Everything that they're coming in contact with is a new idea, and that new idea is trying to solve a problem that you created. And in my opinion, the student was not solving it. That's the thing, is that's what the older generation sees, is that they're not solving it. I'm like, doesn't matter if they're not solving it. They have to learn that for themselves, the same way the millennials had to learn that not getting a job is not the answer. It's about unsubscribing from the old and then resubscribing to your new job and new purpose, but that's still your responsibility. It's nobody's responsibility to provide some company that pays you perfectly in your job that your baby hand held through. Like sorry that you invested so much money in college and there was no payout. You should have known that when you saw how much you were going to make on your application. So understanding both sides of this and encouraging the younger generation into their own ideas. It doesn't matter if it's a good one or a bad one.
Yeah.
You just have to encourage them into it. And if you do disagree with it, you just have to be like, wouldn't heroin, wouldn't that deteriorate your body? Okay. That's the way that I would handle it, is I would just be like, wouldn't heroin deteriorate your body? Yes, but that doesn't matter. I love my heroin. Okay. You are not ready to listen. You're not ready to get off of it. You can try and steer that conversation, but that's what people go through with addiction all the time, is how to psychologically impact someone who, is not coherent and can't, all they're doing is coping with this self-hating belief, and whatnot. Well, don't create that to begin with. And those decisions won't become years of turbulence And that's interesting. And our generation is when really coming out of the closet, like between probably started in the 90s, where it was kind of becoming socially accepted, and the turbulence these people had to go through to even do that act, the amount of social backlash just put them back so far in becoming who they were, regardless of whether you agree with it,
Yeah, we all subscribed to a system that is resurfacing today as to why it's not working anymore, but we all subscribed together, unfortunately, to a system at a very young age that was created over time, way beyond our time, that basically taught the whole dynamic of codependency versus narcissism basically had played out in our system, and we subscribed to a system that was not about loving ourselves and having compassion for ourselves at all. It was more about tuning into people outside yourself first before you tune into yourself, and that in reaction later down the line ended up becoming this split between codependent people versus narcissistic people, where if you want to define the two, like codependency is people who had to be over and over inauthentic and give up aspects of themselves to appease others and gain approval or love from others. And then narcissism on the opposite spectrum.
Oh my god, that's so funny. Is it 3:30 already?
Is it?
Sorry. No, it's fine. I have a meeting at 4 that I forgot about, but we're okay. I've got about like 15 minutes, so.
Oh, Jesus. We didn't even touch up on the list.
I know, we've just been talking so much. Girl, I think that we should do these things all the time. Like, to be honest, I think they're so good. And I don't know, like, talking about what direction we're going in, I think both of us are going in a very independent-based, motivational speaking type of thing. Because if you have a product, you have an art product, you have the success stories, the animation success stories, you have those. And I have a bunch of students who are like, and people all the time who fangirl about how you got there and what you got there in that whole industry. And you can talk about all sorts of things for artists who are in the industry, for people who want to go into the industry, for people who want to keep up their art, and even just then emotional health and well-being and all of that stuff, and specifically how to ground it into today. Teal Swan talks about how so many people are escapists, and I think the escapism is going away. I think that people are developing their focus and being able to navigate how to use things like social media and how to use your platforms in order to present your product is not vain. Like, it really isn't vain for you to be like, I'm a makeup artist, here's all my makeup, or I'm a pianist. Like, the videos I'm posting, actually, I'm trying to post mistakes because I'm a learner right now. I say I'm a pianist for obvious, like, all of the work that I do, and I fit into that category. But the product I'm putting out is more about the process of learning and how so many people think, like, we're breaking the paradigms. I can't do that because I'm older, or I can't, something else we'll talk about next time is what you do when it comes to performance time. Like, for piano, I've got people who want to take lessons, but they don't want to perform. And I'm like, you want to learn, but you don't want to produce. Got it. What? And why don't you want to produce is because you have a block there, and that's an inspirational block and a motivational block, know? And it's really cool because it's going to steer both of us. And I think that what you had talked about with your podcast is, like, you just have to include your philosophies, and maybe that wasn't as easily well done, in previous work and how you were doing it. But I'm, like, totally down to this as much as you want. Just talk and post. And, I don't know.
Yeah, so if we want to, before we get on like more tangents and stuff, if we want to kind of like wrap this particular episode up. It's funny because me and
you
Lindsey...
have a list of questions that we never touched. So
yeah, so I know every single time. So even the last time we spoke, we wanted to attack this list, and I'm noticing this time around, we wanted to also just mainly have this be about this list. And it's funny how we're like never getting to this list, but I'm noticing...
Artist standard time.
Yeah. Artists are just fluid, okay? Don't judge it. So
you also have to see what comes up in the consciousness this week, like for motivation, what's in the thing.
I'm noticing
we touched on good points.
This entire time that we talked, I'm kind of seeing the reason why I didn't even get to this list is because in my own life right now, throughout this recording, this chat between you and I it feels a lot harder than and less fluid compared to the time that we both talked at first. And I'm seeing why, and it's because my relationships with my relationship with myself and my relationship with others as far as like friends, acquaintances, family goes, have all been really difficult in these last few weeks. And
mine as well.
It's hard for us to like tap into the collective right now because we're kind of going through a self-loathing phase as well, because we're kind of going through running into this issue again with the codependent versus the narcissist, where like we feel like right now being authentic is not okay for a lot of people at the moment, and we've been forced to step into this authenticity recently more so than we have before. And we're kind of going through that state right now where like we're learning to accept ourselves no matter what, even though we're learning that a lot of these people are not accepting ourselves right now. So I feel like that's probably why I keep this time around I have so many blocks, because I'm like right now I'm going through a period of like I'm trying to learn to trust myself again and to honor what I have to say, because the last couple of weeks I've had conversations where a lot of people didn't have any...
Dude. Yeah, you were telling me about that, just like the lashback and reactivity that you had towards just making your own expression, which is what your art is, right? Like anything that you say of your own expression is your own expression. And why I was like, dude, we could do this so much is that really what we do when we come here is we've got some questions and some direction at the beginning, but we really are just talking about removing our blocks every week and regarding our motivation. And your motivation is always a flowing, constant, I almost think of it as a circadian rhythm, which is like you wake up, you do this, there's a flow to life, and as it starts to slow down and become stagnant, it gets uncomfortable. And when it starts to speed up and become too fast and anxious, right, it's like it's bad too. And there's a flow, and we're trying to create like a very equal flow. And I think every time we can address whatever questions come up, but also just whatever's been up that week, because you and I are both dealing with the same thing, which is very collaboration based. We're both dealing with how to create collaboration in a way that doesn't take away from our own authority, and what is that taking place of in that new realization right now, and the environment I'm in right now that didn't match that when I applied myself to it, and those changes that come along with it. And is it escapism? Is it not escapism? Technically I think that law of attraction drives everything no matter what, so as long as your focus is in the virtuous place, like it doesn't matter whether it continues or doesn't continue, there's always a new project or new asset that's going to come in for you to express yourself. It's just about you not compromising that expression, which means I guess I will do a lower quality of self in order to appease. That's what you're talking about, the authenticity. And next time we can totally dive into those questions, into whatever, even more personal stuff. That would be cool to talk about, more personal examples. Think of examples in your workplace that come up, for examples.
Because in this list, I remember reading through this list, and this list did force me to get into a vulnerable place in my own memories. And in order to talk about that, I feel like this whole time period right now, what we're going through with the collective, feeling our relationship with ourselves versus others, and stepping more into our authenticity, I feel like I'll feel more safe being vulnerable talking about those memories when we bring up these responses.
And hopefully other people who are listening, like, I think the focus of this podcast too, if we decided to do it like podcast style, YouTube style, I don't know how to podcast things. I can barely plug in my own piano to the wall. So when it comes to logistics of technology, I will not be your gal. But the whole point of this would be really a sharing place to get people as you have your points of interest before you evaluate your own life. This would be one of the points of interest that people can take as real life. This is a real life look into the industry, the art industry, and this is a real life look into music life, nightlife. And I want to really be careful about saying my experience in music life, because I don't like to put down, like, and I'm sure you don't want to put down people who choose this lifestyle. It's different if you choose it because it is your lifestyle. I'm finding, like, I'm so ethereal and laid back that, like, rocking out on stage at 11 o'clock at night, it's loud. It hurts my ears. I had ear damage for 3 days one night from a show. And it was bad. It was really bad. And I felt embarrassed. I didn't tell anyone about it because that's just the nature of the show. And it looks like I'm being a baby. And so it's just like, well, I don't want to put people down, but it would be interesting to share those different types of experiences and just how they contrast what your expression is. It's nothing that expression is wrong. It's that when it doesn't match yours, instead of saying, you're right, I'm embarrassed that I had hearing loss. That was actually my first reaction when it happened, was I was embarrassed for like 2 days until Kyle was like, dude, you can't hear me. I know I don't talk loud. And I'm like, yeah, I can't, like it was a thing. And just being like, oh, okay, this happened. It's nobody's fault. We were just in a loud venue doing our job, and it just may not be my thing. My bedtime's 9 o'clock. I got sensitive hearing. I'm a girl. I like my popcorn and my easy nights in, and doing, breakfast piano, what I'm trying to get going now, might be more pertinent to my environment, my vibration and my environment. That's my style of music. Everybody listens to a different style of music. Talk about later.
Yeah, it's kind of like COVID brought up this whole, like, now we're all forced to work from home. And we had, in our own industry, we had problems we had the people who want to continue working from home versus the people who are like, no, we miss the office. That was our happy place, and now it's taken away from us. And I remember when I was, like, kind of arguing my point, people thought that, like, I was basically saying, like, no, we should all only have to work from home and not in the office because of this and this and this. And I told them, no, that's not where I'm getting at. Like, when we can eventually work in an office again, I suggest people go to the office if that's what they want to do. I'm just saying, don't take this, if people feel more comfortable working from home, don't take that away from them. Like, why don't we all just do what makes, what helps ourselves and not feel embarrassed about it? Like, cause that is a thing where if, like, a lot of people who want to work from home, for some reason that has, like, a negative stigma, like, oh, you're just lazy, or, oh, you just don't want to, like, get up early, and then, you don't want to drive, and blah, blah. You
talk about it like it's a bad thing.
Yeah! And it's like, no, it's like, hey, if it works for us, why the hell not? If we're...
Millennial way! The way of the millennials!
Yeah, and next time around when we talk, I can even talk about how a time I manifested illness from going against the grain and not, like, and ignoring what my needs were. So, like, not only did it come to the fact where, like, I would... have a lot of days where I would end up working from home, but they weren't okay with that. They didn't like that, but I had to call out of work a lot. It started getting to a point because where my body was like, you physically can't go into work now because you have this illness now where you have to take care of your needs, because if you don't, you're gonna have to call out of work. It literally ended up getting to that point.
In that video I was watching this morning that you're like, brush up on this, we'll talk about it. And I don't know, we never did, but Teal was like, here's what'll happen is that you'll push yourself to a point where then you just literally don't match up with it. And then she's like, I'll just get sick, I'll just make you sick. I haven't been sick in a really long time.
Me neither.
A really long time. I can't say the last time I was sick. Like, if I get sick once a year, that's That's a lot. Like at this point, and I used to get sick when I was a kid. That was one of the things going on with my hormones. I would get fevers of 105, 106. Like if I do run a fever, I have to watch that. But yeah, I'm so happy I'm not there anymore.
Well, yeah, and I'm not there anymore, and I can definitely say it's because I don't have to drive anymore, and it's because I don't have to work in an environment I don't want to go to anymore.
It's bringing you back to you. I think the people who actually struggle with their sense of self and their sense of alone time and their balancing of self deal with the limit of extroversion the most. And that's not always true. It's not to say that like you are now insecure because you like to connect with people.
Yeah.
That's not where I was going with that.
Yeah.
But the people who feel a sense of like claustrophobia, that fear showing up, it is like, it shouldn't be that bad if your body's trying to tell you something. Girl, I hate to cut this. I gotta go.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you, Lindsey.
I wanted to see how this one turns out, but yeah, I'm probably going to upload the first one and the second one to my thing and upload them on your stuff. And if you can just give me, when you do this, will you do the same thing? I like your Sabrina, like, EMOTIVATION podcast. I want to keep all of your titles and pictures and everything on it. Like,
okay, so I'll edit this.
And
I'll edit this one, and then I'll send it to you when it's done being edited.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, girl. I love you so much. I will see you later. Good talk.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Lindsey. Love you.
Bye.